Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So what a difference a week makes. Well, depending on what continent you're on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe. It does. It does. A lot can happen in a week. As far as formats with one deck representing, half the top tables, we definitely saw a surprising amount of turbulence this week. Some twists and some turns.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and kind of like a reawakening of an old hated archetype. Or, I don't know, it depends on your perspective. But, there's just very, very different stuff in some of these Grand Prix top 8s from the past weekend. Like Ryuichi Tamada's deck, for example, we haven't seen anything like this obviously Blue-White Flash is a thing, right? It was the main deck prior to, I guess, 2 sets ago. But, it's there, it's back. I'm not sure what to say about it. It's initiating glory.
Yeah, but there's several little tweaks and twists. So I actually played against this deck at the Pro Tour, but not this build at all. There's a couple important innovations that are taking place here besides the Glorybound Initiate. Glorybound Initiate, I think, is actually basically has been universally adopted since Amonkhet became legal. But that's actually not where the real technology of Tamada's build is located. There's a couple other places in his white-blue flash deck that he used to win Grand Prix Manila. There's a couple other places that seem of particular interest. First of all, the one that's probably going to stand out to people a little bit more, but it is the use of 3 negates in addition to 6 of the enchantments. 4 Stasis Snare and 2 Cast Out. That's a lot more interaction, instant speed interaction than we've seen out of these flash decks lately. I mean, they usually had the rattle chains, but to have actual 6 removal spells and 3 negates, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it just depends. Like, weren't some of them playing that the U2 card that mana leaks for 4? Okay. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think of Blue-White Flash as being a deck that was in any radar, at least for me, since Aether Revolt, right? Since Smuggler's Copter rotated. So, to me, anything is a little bit different.
The use of 2 Cast Out and 4 Stasis Snare, I just think that's kind of interesting. That's a lot of, removal.
I mean,
then I love the 3 negates. The 3 negates I can't get behind enough. That's just fantastic. I mean, who's negate not great against?
Oh, it's good against everybody. You're right. I mean, I think if I were the pilot of this, I were decided I was going to play 6, I think I'd play 4 Cast Out, 2 Stasis Snare, or 3 and 3 rather than 2 Cast Out and 4 Stasis Snare. But what do you think about that? But Cast Out seems like way more of a card that you might want. It's much more versatile. It's cheap if you want to just get it out of your hand. The Stasis Snare is kind of clunky.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's nice just being able to curve out. I would play at least... Yeah, I think I would play at least 9 3s in this deck. But with 4 Stasis Snare, he's actually at 10. So it's pretty close. I mean, I could imagine playing a 3-3 split, but, there's something to being able to just... having your spells come down a turn earlier, or having your land come into play untapped, that goes a long way, and that actually dovetails nicely into my favorite part of Tamada's deck: 0 irrigated farmlands.
Ah, well, I think that's just a man who knows what he wants to do, right? And he doesn't want to. He wants his lands to come into play, hopefully come into play untapped, and tap for Gideons and Archangel Avacyn's on curve.
And if you already know that you're not going to cycle your lands, then that really changes the value of the irrigated farmlands.
Yeah, I mean, they're just terrible, right? Like, they're just coastal.
Well, they're not just... they're still better than... And they're still coastal towers that untap your port towns.
Yeah,
so is every other card in the deck, right?
Not too much better, right? If you're really never going to cycle them, right? Like, they're
pretty close.
You don't go there.
Pretty close. But this is an interesting deck. 3 Dusk to Dawns, the secret weapon against green-black.
Yeah, do you think the success of this deck is at least in part because of the decline in popularity of Mardu?
Oh, definitely.
Because, like, Mardu is just
question.
better than this deck if they're heads up, right? Like that's
Mardu annihilates this deck head to head.
Like, you know, we have all the same cards except for my creatures are faster and bigger than yours, and I have Heart of Kiran. Like, that's just the way that I would look at the matchup.
This deck doesn't want to play against a turn 1 Toolcraft Exemplar or turn 2 Heart of Kiran.
Yeah, it's just going to take 7, right? Like, that's all that's going to happen.
Well, no. That's all that's going to happen on that one turn, but you'll take 7 more the next turn.
All right, don't worry. They've got a 3-drop that might come down the next turn and probably eat a shock.
The white blue flash deck, though, it was actually part of a bigger trend of Spell Queller decks that really had a great weekend. The key is just how good Spell Queller and the various Spell Queller decks are against Aetherworks Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, that was even from Aetherworks Marvel's debut, you know, what is it, 3 Pro Tours ago now? Spell Queller was, like, always one of the really great ways to interact with it because if you're the
4 or less.
Well, you're the Marvel deck, like, your cover spell is typically a Dispel or a Negate, and Dispels and Negates don't protect Marvels very well against Spell Queller, right? That's it.
That and the Marvel deck just doesn't have that much removal, all things considered, and the clock is very relevant.
Yeah, the Spell Queller actually puts the Marvel deck on a clock.
And that's to say nothing of its ability to help contain a couple Thopters. That is part of the equation.
Yeah, I don't know if I know anything about that, but I'll believe you.
Dude, with Whirler Virtuoso? Or are you just saying that because Brad Nelson, you know?
I mean, Brad was too good for Whirler Virtuoso. He played four Rogue Refiner instead.
Dude, Rogue Refiner is sweet. White Blue Flash was actually not the most popular form of Spell Queller deck this weekend, though. Even though it took home the trophy in the hands of Tamada, it's actually Esper Vehicles. You know, there were some Jeskai Vehicles decks, too, but the Jeskai Vehicles decks are only barely not Mardu Vehicle decks. The Esper Vehicle decks, on the other hand, so I think the Esper Vehicle decks are squarely halfway between White Blue Flash and Mardu. You know, from the White Blue Flash side, you've got Spell Queller and Glorybound Initiate and Gideon and, you know, some of the enchantments and a few counter spells and Archangel Avacyn and Thraben Inspect, the whole thing. But on the Mardu side, you've got Heart of Kiran Toolcraft Exemplar and Scrap Heap Scrounger instead of you know, more interaction and more spirits.
So I'm looking at Ki Wen Tao's version. Is that the version we're going to talk about for a sec?
We can.
So in the main deck, the Esperness of this deck, the black of this deck, is just the buyback on Scrap Heap Scrounger, right? Am I looking at this right?
Yeah.
So, but then I guess the black, which is coming from 4 Concealed Courtyards, a Fetid Pools, and I guess Spire of Industry is a nice little cheaty way to get this going. But it has like some interesting black coming out of the sideboard, right? So, Kalidas, that's an aggressive choice, I think. Just because of the double black on a 4-drop. Like, I think, like, Sorin is so much more palatable for a deck like this. It's 6, and it only costs 1 black. But there's Kalidas, and then a couple of Fatal Pushes, and, like, 1 Painful Truths, a Shambling Vent, which I guess helps you when you're siding in your black cards. What do you think? It's so much more black coming out of the sideboard relative to the main deck.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the black in the sideboard is basically letting you do the same thing that all these kinds of decks do after sideboarding. All the different black decks that become kind of like they sideboard into mid-rangey sort of, you know, a little bit more card advantage, some mid-rangey 4 and 5 and 6 casting cost threats, you know, a little bit more of the right kind of removal, and where a lot of Mardu decks might have a couple discard spells, he's got a couple more negates.
What do you think about from trend going forward, though? Do you think these Spell Queller decks or these Mardu decks, these Esper decks are gonna stick around in the metagame, or do you think this was just like a big rock thrown in the middle of the pond, causes a splash for the Marvel decks, and then, you know, we're gonna get Ulamogged again next week?
I mean, we were getting Ulamog this week. Don't let Ulamog's PR agent fool you.
Like I said, it depends what continent you're on.
No, it doesn't, man. Even over in Manila and even over in Amsterdam, Ulamog was just wrecking shop. Like, yeah, I know only one Ulamog deck in the top 8 of Amsterdam and only one in the top 8 of Manila. But, like, the amount, like, the top 32 of those two events was almost half Teamer Aetherworks.
Operative word, almost.
Sure.
And if you think about it, Teamer Aetherworks is like 4 different decks, right? You got
almost all these decks are the same, though.
Now.
Yeah. Now, that said, there are lots of other energy decks. There's no question energy has shown up. But
how many Chandras? Which Chandras? It's a completely different deck.
So what did you think of the Teamer, I guess the Teamer energy aggro deck played by Will Craddock? This was the GP with over in Omaha, where it was actually just a red-green aggro deck, but with it was the red-green deck with Channeler, Initiate, and Servant of the Conduit, ramping out Glory Bringers and Chandras.
So I confess, when I first saw this deck, I don't want to be insulting in any way. I just don't understand why you would ever play this deck. That's the reading. Like, if you look at the blue cards, he's got Baral's Expertise in the sideboard. He's got some Whirler Virtuoso action. But, like, it just seems... Like, I guess he's got, like, the 8-pack of accelerating guys on 2, but it seems like a little underpowered to me. And it's not like he's... Like, I feel like if I'm going to play a deck like this, I'm going to bury Marvel and Negates, right? Like, I'm going to go guy, negate, and just kind of race them out and make, close them out with Deep Fiend. But he didn't even go that direction. He just has, like, some low to medium power removal cards and then just some dudes. Like,
Elder Deep Fiend is not just some dudes.
Yeah, he invested in the full 3. I mean, it's like I said, I'm not trying to be insulting. I really don't understand it. Like, I'm not sure
which part. Which part? The Elder Deep Fiends?
I don't understand why someone would want to choose to play this deck. That's the thing.
Okay, so to start with, you were on board with the red-green energy deck last week or 2 weeks ago with 4 Servant of the Conduits, 4 Channeler Initiates.
Yeah, but
you're just ramping out Chandras, Bristling Hydras, and Glory Bringers.
But that was a red-green deck. This is a Teamer
deck. That's this deck?
No.
Only barely. Dude, you've got 4 Servant of the Conduit, 4 Channeler Initiate, 4 Attune with Ether, 4 Ether Hub, an Island 2, and then, 7. So this deck actually has literally 24 blue sources. And all of them, except the Attune with Ethers, I guess the spells, the Channeler Initiate, Servant, and Attune with Ether. But, like, this deck has so many land that come into play untapped.
But remember, from my perspective anyway, the things that I liked about the red-green potentially would have been Heart of Kiran. And the deck that we were talking about, I'm like, why is there no Heart of Kiran? And, the combination of...
Stack that to an Elder Deep Fiend.
Green God and Heart of Kiran, I'm like, okay, this kind of makes sense to me. Some of these cards are really good, right? Like Bristling Hydra, it's weird to me. It depends what metagame you're in. Like, I think Bristling Hydra and Glorybringer are really good cards if you think you're going to play against Mardu, right? But they're not exceptional cards against Marvel, right? Elder Deep Fiend, I think, it's got some text against Marvel. But
no, basically everybody else has been cutting Glorybringers from their deck. It's just not where you want to be against Marvel.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you're playing against Mardu, Bristling Hydra and Glorybringer makes sense to me. But I don't know, this seems like a Marvel-defined format. And
this seems like a Marvel deck that every time you were going to draw your Aetherworks Marvel, instead you draw a Bristling Hydra. And every time you were going to flip an Ulamog instead, you're like, well, hopefully Elder Deep Fiend's enough.
Yeah, do you see where I'm coming from on it? Like,
Of course!
It just doesn't make sense to me, this deck. Like, maybe it's great. I don't know.
I think this deck is a great example of flexing. When you just got it like that you can, not have to worry about spinning the wheel, and instead you can just be all, when you can win with a little finesse.
You're just saying that Will Craddock's just like, his arm is at a 90-degree angle, and he's like just tearing the fabric on his shirt with the muscularity of his biceps, right? Like he's like, I'm so good that my Attune with Aether just powers out a Glorybringer, right? Like that's what your assessment is.
So what did you think of Blue-Red Control in the hands of Benjamin Luft? This one was over in Amsterdam with a little bit different of a take on Blue-Red Control, with actually Sphinx of the Final Word.
Yeah.
Instead of any amount, so basically cutting Pull from Tomorrow to make room for Sphinx of the Final Word main deck.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not super in love with this build. Sphinx of the Final Word is the first thing that I'd be like, not in love with that. Not in love with 25 lands combined with a 7-drop.
I actually like the 25 land part.
Yeah?
And I'll tell you why. Yeah. I don't love it, but I like it. So the reason that I kind of like it is a couple fold. First of all, it's a fake 25 land. He's also got 2 Hieroglyphic Illumination in addition to the 4 Glimmer. He's got an Anticipate. He does have the 2 Sweltering Suns main deck, which is, something. But then importantly, because he doesn't have Pull from Tomorrow, he's actually operating on a little leaner of a mana base.
Yeah, but the Hieroglyphic Illuminations are just kind of in the pull slots. Like I kind of get that.
No. You illuminate for 4 on turn 4. You look at 2 cards, and that helps fix your mana.
No, but they're just occupying the space of. They're obviously it's different cards.
You wouldn't have pulled on turn 4.
I don't think we're saying that things that are in conflict with each other.
No, I know.
I'm saying there's only so much room in your deck, and
I'm saying you don't need 25 land because you're casting Hieroglyphic Illumination to help hit your 5th land drop.
I can see that. There's also another small thing, which is that he's got 2 copies of Kefnet the Mindful in his sideboard, and so you can kind of cheat on land if you're going to play Kefnet and then just replay the same land. Like that's like a small thing. It's kind of weird. You probably don't necessarily want to do that, but it's just a dimension to your deck. Yeah,
I don't think. I mean, sometimes you'll be in a spot like that, I guess. But really, I think that the louder thing going on here is Kefnet with Kefnet in the sideboard, along with a billion other victory conditions. He's got the Dragon Master Outcast. He's got Thing in the Ice. He's got Chandra Flamecaller. And this is in addition to the main deck Sphinx of the Final Word and Torrential Gearhulks.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably minimum my second favorite archetype to play in Standard. But these are just... I'm not super in love with some of the details on Benjamin's build. What do you think? What do you think about these particulars? 7-drop main deck summary dismissal. I guess is summary dismissal great? Yeah, I think it might be great.
I wouldn't play more than 1, but the first one goes a long way towards giving you a trump card against Ulamog.
Yeah, it's fantastic in that. So if you just land it the one time against Ulamog and then it's in your graveyard and you can land it again off of Gearhulk later, that's really powerful. And I think it's similar to what we were talking about Brutal Expulsion a few weeks ago. You can't have too many forecast and cost counterspells in your deck. But if you just...
Well, you can easily have too many.
Okay.
It just is not advisable.
Yes. The bar on too many... I guess it depends on your perspective. But yeah, this kind of deck it's the kind of deck I think both of us I have a soft spot for. It's got quick interaction in cards like Magma Spray. It's got a huge amount of versatility in the mid game. Even cards, just the one Anticipator is super versatile in a deck like this. And then it's got, I don't know, the second best high end card, if not the first best high end card, to finish off games. My big question is, do you really need the 5th creature if it's going to be a Sphinx of the Final Word? I'm more in your camp. I think I would bring Glory there if I were going to do a 5th.
I'm not going to play Glorybringer right now.
Yeah?
No, the format's just too Marvel.
Then
I might bring it back. I might bring back Glorybringer now that nobody plays it.
If it's me then, and we're not bringing the Glory, I think I'm just like another card drawing spell there. Yeah, what's the difference on curve considerations between that and a pull? A pull's just actually better in more cases, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a little surprising to me. I don't know people's unnatural love for not pulling. But actually...
you told me before you like Sphinx of the Final Word. I just can't get my head wrapped around this card. It's just not a thing that I want to do in this format.
It's decent. I don't know. I think it's fine.
But,
it has a pretty dramatic effect on the board.
Yeah.
It is a little weird when the only card you want to make uncounterable is pull and you're not playing any.
I don't know. I think that one of the advantages of this deck is that your mana's always untapped, right? Even your huge guy, if it's not Sphinx of the Final Word, your 5/6 guy has flash. Basically, your whole deck has flash, or it allows you to play open the whole game.
Dude, you can just race Ulamog. You just put it down on turn 7, and even if Ulamog comes a couple turns later, there's nothing they can do.
What if he comes that turn?
What if he does? Your guy is hexproof.
Well, it doesn't take them very many attacks. You need 4 attacks to win.
Yeah, you can race.
I believe you. It's possible to race. I think if I'm tapping 7 and the other guy's like, oh, okay, shield staff.
I do like 0 commit to memory right now.
Yeah.
I think the format's in just this really messed up place where there's just no mid-range. So, the rules of engagement are just very warped and weird.
I think that when I've played these kind of decks so far, commits memory was the most. It's the most fun that I.
Oh,
like.
No question.
It's so fun to bleed out all of their cards and then just frustrate them with this forecasting cost Vencerous card, and then just reload, and but you have 20 life, and then you just have the 7 cards in hand again. It's fun. I like it.
So part of the problem with trying to play any mid-range strategy is not just the existence of Trench of Your Hulk and Pull from Tomorrow type effects, Corner Genius, all that. Teamer Aetherworks, such as the version Brad Nelson used to win the GP over stateside in Omaha, they really make it tough for anybody else playing anything remotely fair, mid-range anyway. His build of Teamer Aetherworks, though, a little exotic.
4 Rogue Refiner, 4 Ulamog, so super kind of... Is streamlined the right word for threats there?
Minimalist.
Minimalist? I can
2 Chandra, 4 Ulamog, very minimalist.
And he's heavy on the 3 Censor, 3 Dissenter's Deliverance. Man, Dissenter's Deliverance is the choice of champions this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, part of it is Sean McLaren started a revolution.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just that's everywhere now.
But so let's one at a time, though, right? So we're talking about the exoticness of Brad's deck. Tireless Tracker, nothing too confusing there, right? People have been
his sideboard Tireless Tracker.
Yeah, but then he's got Ulvenwald Hydra. So I think this is some technology worth dwelling on, right? So
this is the most Brad Nelson-esque technology this is how Brad rolls. This is Brad's bread and butter. He literally, he has been playing red-green ramp decks with, sideboarding more creatures for so long. He had a little taste. He played Lotus Cobra, way back. And ever since then, he has been just always looking at ways to, change the paradigm for how people build acceleration ramp decks.
So I like Ulvenwald Hydra maybe too much. I don't know if you remember, I was playing like some green-white deck last year with 4.
I don't think I could possibly forget.
So the listeners, either their ears are scarred. But when I looked at Brad's sideboard, and then I looked at that Shrine of the Forsaken Gods in his sideboard, then I double-taked back to his main deck and saw the 2 Shrine of the Forsaken Gods in his main deck, and then I looked back at the Ulvenwald Hydras, I had the only thought you can possibly have if you're me. Damn it. Why didn't I... Why didn't I think of this? It's so good. It is so good. So if you don't realize what's so good about this, Ulvenwald Hydra is a 6 casting cost card, right? This isn't a deck with any elves. The implication is you've got 6 land in play if you're casting it, right? So you cast it.
Other than Aetherworks Marvel.
Just say casting it, not like, marveling it out. You can go get Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, and Shrine of the Forsaken Gods has this clause, which is that it can tap for 2, but only if you have 7 or more land in play, right? But you already had 6, so you always have 7, right? So you're tutoring it for it, and it's just online. And that means that it's Brad's get out of jail free, right? Like, the worst thing for Marvel players is getting a handful of Ulamogs. But he's just compacting getting able to get the Ulamogs out by having this, like, tiny little combo going on. And it's synergistic with Tireless Tracker, all these little things, but it's huge itself.
Well, it's not an accident that Brad has the Lumbering Falls.
Oh,
That's part of the plan.
Just attack phase?
Like, yeah, the Hydra comes down as a 7/7, plus you have the Lumbering Falls. It's an implied 2-turn clock.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't see that.
That's pretty good, right?
It's very good. I was too fixated on the Shrine. You're right. But, like, there's all the little things just add together. Like, the Ulvenwald Hydra and the Tireless Tracker are best buddies. Right? Like,
of course.
And, like, the Ulvenwald Hydra is just big. And, he could just... He built his deck in particular to be able to weave together all of these things, because he's got, instead of Whirler Virtuoso, he's got 4 Rogue Refiner, which is, kind of a card-drawing spell. He's got Dissenter's Deliverance and Censor and 4 copies of Glimmer of Genius. Obviously some people have 0 copies of Glimmer of Genius. These are all just, like, small fix my land count / value plays that get him to a mid game where even if his Marvel isn't online, he just has better kind of snowballing effects that are like, oh, this guy's value, this guy's big in value, and like you said,
this deck is deceptively well set up, like a Splinter Twin deck, where it's all like it's got the deadly combo, right, in the free wins. Or like, but it actually just plays like a normal deck. Like Rogue Refiner's a 2-for-1, a great 2-for-1. Glimmer of Genius is a great 2-for-1. And then obviously like Aetherworks and Chandra can be tomes. But then when you've got Negate, Harness Lightning, Censor, and Dissenter's Deliverance, that's a lot of very efficient interaction.
Yeah,
go ahead.
His like mid-range / Naya / rock kind of game plan is pretty good.
Oh yeah.
It's just there. I mean, he's just gonna like Chandra's a 2-for-1, right? If you're gonna play it that way.
Ulamog's a 3-for-1.
Yeah, and he's just gonna cast it. That's the thing. It's so filthy.
No, yeah. So this is definitely a well-tuned list. That's Brad Nelson's definitely no stranger to a well-tuned standard deck, particularly for the existing formats.
Yeah, so you want to jump over to the other Dissenter's Deliverance deck? Lucas Blohan won, which Grand Prix was this? Amsterdam. With an echo of McLaren's green-black deck, this time with 4 copies of Dissenter's Deliverance. I think you kind of implied it. Is this going to be the standard build now? This Dissenter's Deliverance kind of combo delirium...
I think the fact that Dissenter's Deliverance is so valuable against Marvel, which even though often they're going to get 1 spin, they don't always get you. And so, it is real nice to get it off the table. And the opportunity cost is relatively low, particularly when Dissenter's Deliverance is such a great card against Mardu. And the opportunity cost of cycling it, it's like, yes, you spent a mana, but this is a deck with no 1-drops anyway, and you want an instant in your graveyard for Traverse.
Yeah, all those things.
And that's not even counting the fact that, obviously, when you're playing against like, for instance, you're playing against Blue-Red Control, this deck doesn't have any Grasp of Darknesses. It has 0 Grasp of Darknesses.
Yeah.
You don't get stuck with Grasp of Darkness in your hand. Instead, you have a card you can cycle for 1, and it can still kill the Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, I think that's the big point, right? So this card is a terror against Torrential Gearhulk or Heart of Kiran that you can just get out of your hand if you don't want it for a single green mana. It's weird how good it is.
Right.
Like, it's shockingly good. Because its plan B is so... It's a perfect plan B, actually, right? I think this build is revolutionary, impressive, however you want to talk about it. And then Blohan's got his sideboard set up. Like, I guess this is just what we do now. He's got the mid-range go long sideboard where
it's what every black deck sideboards.
Like, look, here's my 2-for-1s, here's my other 2-for-1s, here's my 5-for-1.
Planeswalkers,
yeah,
a little bit of interaction to the hand.
Yeah, I think it's just, we talked about it before when McLaren kind of unveiled this build a few weeks ago. This is like the Masters black-green deck. You could see it's just all tuning. It's just all like 15-degree changes, not like 45-degree changes or 90-degree changes. Just like, I'm just gonna curve this over here. I'm gonna shave this over here and bury you with slight improvements.
I do like the never to returns.
Yeah.
Not like insane or anything, but it is kind of nice having extra answers to Planeswalkers. Not even just game 1, but in anticipation of the fact that everybody switches into mid-range Planeswalkers after sideboarding. Let's talk a minute actually about why everybody does that, because I think a lot of people sometimes, they gloss over the fact that that's just what everybody does. But why? Why switch to a mid-rangey Planeswalker deck, and why does everybody already do that? Why don't they just start that way?
Well, this is actually something you taught me. I think we were working on some Stoneblade variation a few years ago. If you're Marvel, right? You're Marvel and you do it, it's the easiest answer, which is that you want to get the most free wins, right? So you can start your deck in multiple different configurations, but the Marvel deck has a huge incentive to start in its busted form because it has this text of just tapping a forecasting cost artifact and winning the game on the spot, right? That's a huge incentive. And then it actually depends deeply on the sophistication of your opponent, because if a Marvel deck is built in let's say in the way that Brad has built it, which is this minimalist build with 4 huge guys that are very resistant to removal. Ulamog it can be removed, but not very easily, not by a huge percentage of the mainline spells. And Rogue Refiner, neither one of them is like convenient to kill, and both of them are value though, right? So Rogue Refiner, even if you get it with a grasp or a shock or whatever, it's gotten you pretty good, right? It's provided both energy and card advantage. So depending on the sophistication of your opponent, they could just like, oh, this stuff doesn't work. I'm going to side out all my shocks because I don't want to just shock Rogue Refiner. I'm going to side out all my whatever kind of removal spells because they're ineffective at the point that we're in an Ulamog game anyway. And that actually increases the efficacy of a card like Tireless Tracker, right? Like Tireless Tracker, like Rogue Refiner, is a 3/2 creature for 3, but it's very, very vulnerable. Like the turn that you play it, if you play it on turn 3, it could just die to a shock. But if people, if you're betting that people are going to take their shocks out, then Tireless Tracker gets way, way better, right? I think it's one of the reasons that people play these kind of demi-transformations.
Well, I'm not even just talking the transformations for the Marvel. I'm talking about like in these black-green decks, in the Mardu decks, and all these decks that sideboard, some 4s and 5. Like here, we've got 2 Gonti, Lord of Luxury, 2 Ob Nixilis, an Ishkana Graph Widow, and a Liliana. So there's like a bunch of Planeswalkers and mid-rangey threats. and then there's a little bit of removal and a little bit of interaction. But when you look at the Mardu decks, it's like they'll board in one Chandra and a Sorin and an Omnixilus and a Painful Truce, and all these different black decks that sideboard threats that cost 4 and 5 mana.
Well,
what are they?
I think the Mardu philosophy is different than the black-green philosophy, even though
really
they're doing similar things. Yeah, I think that the Mardu deck has these like hyper-fast potential busto attack draws with Toolcraft Exemplar into Heart of Kiran, right? And that the pulse of the game is such that, especially let's say just just for narrative purpose, the Mardu deck has won the flip. They're going first, and they go Toolcraft Exemplar into Heart of Kiran. The experience of playing against that is pressure, and you're back against the wall from as early as turn 2 or 3, right? So you're going to tend to value cards like Grasp of Darkness, Fatal Push, Shock, etc. against that kind of a deck. So the Mardu game plan, at least in part, depending on what tools the opponent has, is to play a game plan where the permanents are not easily destroyed by cards like Fatal Push, and to stretch the game long. And when the opponent is focusing their sideboard plan on cards that are about making the game short, right? That like the speed of the game is different, and the turns where we want to pick our fights become different.
And what about the black-green deck?
I think that the black-green decks, its sideboard tools are a little bit different, so because they're much more specialized, at least in my mind, right? So Ishkana Graph Widow, for example, was outstanding in particular matchups. In
Mardu, especially,
specifically Mardu, yeah, in a way that other sideboard cards or other go-long cards aren't. Specifically, Planeswalkers, right? If you're playing Planeswalkers, their efficacy in a particular game has a ton of variables attached to it, right? Like, do you have a creature in play at the point that you're resolving a Planeswalker is going to change how likely it is you're going to untap with that Planeswalker. What configuration was your opponent's deck in? If you're playing a deck with Never to Return, a Planeswalker has got a lot less likelihood to survive, but it also has less likelihood to survive if you're playing cards like Glorybringer, Archangel Avacyn, or just removal cards and you've got creatures in play, right? So, the value of these cards is very, very contextually driven, and it's also at least somewhat driven by how your opponent is chosen to sideboard.
So, when I see these decks, I think that what they're really doing is having a main deck that's proactive and consistent. They're relying on fast, aggressive openings, because when you play mid-range, if you don't have the right cards, like the mid-range cards right now are such that if you have the wrong ones, the wrong answers, you're a rock deck. That you can just draw the wrong cards at the wrong time and it doesn't work out. But when you play a strategy that's only mid-range, when you have the knowledge of your opponent's deck, then you can have the correct interaction. You can have the correct mix of removal, the correct amount of threats, the correct speed of deck. So what all these decks are doing is they're just playing a really fast, consistent game one and sideboarding into the appropriate mid-range deck. Here, it may not be quite as fast as Toolcraft Exemplar Heart of Kiran, but Winding Constrictor Rishkar Pima Renegade is no slouch.
That's good offense.
And it's not like Verdurous Gear Hulk is a slow card.
No, especially when you've got, those other guys, Winding Constrictor and Rishkar Pima Renegade on your team, right? Those guys stack really well.
So, what do you think of this version of black-green versus the energy deck that's so popular? Because a lot of people, the green-black energy deck, it's right around half of the green-black decks. Like half of them are based on McLaren's deck, and half of them are much more aggressive with Attune with Ether instead of Traverse, obviously, but then Greenbelt Rampager, Glint Sleeve Siphoner, stuff like that. Long Tusk Cub.
Well,
lots of 1 and 2 costs. Or I guess I should say just lots of 2-cost cards.
So I think there's a couple of things that differentiate these. I think that the green-black energy deck is way swingier than the green-black Delirium deck. I think the green-black Delirium deck, I look at it and I think this is a deck that's quite steady, and it's very rewarding to players of a particular skill level. I think that the green-black energy deck is just much more rewarding to getting the high end of your draws. It doesn't give up so much right on its medium draws, but it's much, much more rewarding to play this deck offensively. Would you agree?
I mean, this is a much more offensive deck. I would say you rely on the offense a lot more.
Yeah, so let's put it this way: if your opponent is like, if you can pick, your archetype dynamically, and your opponent is going to stumble, right? Just that you would pick the green-black energy deck as having a higher likelihood of winning than the green-black delirium deck if your opponent's going to stumble, right? Like it's much better at exploiting an opening in game one. That's one of the ways that I would look at it.
So which one do you like better, though?
I like the McLaren type version better in the abstract. But I think I would be flattering myself if I thought that I could play it as well as I play the green-black.
Dude, I don't know. I think you... I don't know. I wonder if you romanticize at all the green-black deck. Don't get me wrong, it's challenging. I mean, it's a Jund deck. It's an Abzan deck. You got all these choices you got to make. But, like, it's just magic, man.
I heart you so much, Patrick. I don't know if you recall, but... You once walked past me, so it was like my rematch against Shields. Like the week earlier, I had beaten Shields on the way to winning a 5K. We were playing like the same 75s against each other. I was playing my blue-red Splinterson Twin deck, and Shields was playing his white-blue Stoneblade deck that he had won Grand Prix Dallas with like a month earlier. We're sitting there, and you look over in my hand, and I've got the cards Mana Leak, Consecrated Sphinx, and Jace the Mind Sculptor. And I guess a rational person plays four of his 6 mana to play the Jason Mind Sculptor, and then counters Shields' counter, right? That's what they would do. But what I did was play my Consecrated Sphinx. You looked at me, looked at my Consecrated Sphinx, looked at into the Royal in Shields' hand, and then you literally said, you just tap as much mana as you have on your own turn still. And then you walked away. And I lost that. It was a tight game, and I managed to lose it. I'm just saying, like... I
don't know, man. It is... Sometimes it can be challenging to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, I lost. I think that match was worth $500, too, like in hindsight. But anyway, yeah. I played the Consecrated Sphinx. I'm like, what could he possibly have? Oh, I don't know. Into the Royal? It's a commonly played card that I could have easily cast I don't know. If he's just Into the Royal, no buyback, or no kicker against my Jace is probably pretty good. Anyway, yes, I think that the number of decisions that have very similar value outcomes in the Delirium deck I think I would have a lot of opportunities to lose like 1%. And if you do that too many times in a single game, you end up losing like 5% or 10%, which is more than enough to lose the game in the margins that we have in Standard right now. That's what I think. Versus, I think if I'm just like landing my Glint Sleeve Siphoner on turn 2, I think I know how to attack with a 2-drop and get a blocker out of the way. Those are things that I know how to do that. I think that the variance is higher on the green-black energy deck, in part due to its relatively low land count and as like a kind of a variable high end at Verdur's Gear Hulk, and then sideboarding cards like Sky Sovereign, which relatively expensive. Like those things, I think just create some ripples in your potential outcomes, which could be good, right? You can ride the high end of the variance too.
Man, these are some hell of a theories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like McLaren's list because I think that or McLaren style because I just think that it's better for winning the game, for getting the W's. Like I think that it's more likely that I will have the ability to reduce my opponent's life total to 0 or lower before they can do the same to me.
I think that if your assumption is that you're going to play perfectly, which maybe is your assumption, then McLaren's deck is better.
No, I don't think about such things.
I think if your assumption is you're gonna,
I'm not making assumptions, dude. That's how.
Just play perfectly.
I don't know what it means to play perfect.
To make the correct play
I don't know what the correct play is, man. I'm not omnipotent.
The play that is most likely to move you towards winning instead of away from winning.
Dude, I don't know. I think you and I just think about these things so different. It seems like you go into things with like a plan. I come from the gut.
Shut up. No, you don't. Literally the most strategic player in the world.
No, I definitely do. I come from the gut.
Have you ever taken a picture? Like, I've done this of you, so I've taken a picture of you playing before. Like, and I just stepped away like 30 feet. How your cards are lined up is like so methodical at the table. Nobody's believing your story. Nobody's believing your story. Just because you use a different process for this.
I'm not even joking.
Yeah, because you have an automatic process that's doing this. Most people don't have an automatic process.
Brian Weissman, literally last weekend, I was in Seattle for Mark Rosewater's 50th birthday. Happy birthday to Mark Rosewater, by the way. Brian Weissman is just battling high stakes heads up commander, and he's just got a fully pimped out deck, and he's just using Nim the Pain Artist. And he's just black. And I even got it on video.
Yeah.
He just mana drains and then calmly uses the mana to Pain Geyser himself. And it's just, and he's got his mana. It's just, you should see it. But he's got all of his cards laid out that way. And he said that it warms his cold, dead heart to every time he sees me on coverage, still fighting the good fight against Chaos Orb. And if nothing else, I am doing my part to give back to one of the godfathers of Magic strategy, the pioneer who invented card advantage, Brian Weissman. If there's a little thing I can do to put a smile on his face once every 4 years, or whenever it is I'm playing in a big tournament doing well, then by golly, I'm willing to do that. Plus, you never know. Dude, you don't know. They could bring back Chaos Orb at any point. Emergency unban. Chaos Orb.
I've got it, man. I've got it. I understand where you're coming from. If this is just your habit, if and when they ever reprint / unban Chaos Orb, you're not going to have to learn how to do things differently.
Dude, the Falling Star equity is so good. Like, that Falling Star gets splash damage from your Chaos Orb preparedness. That's the one in Legends that does 3 damage. It's like an Urza's Rage, but you got to flip it to see what you hit. Also, it's not uncounterable. Can't go to the face. Can't do 10. And also, you have to flip it to see what you hit.
Wait, the cards in that set were like really, really high variability as to how good they were. There were some low lows in that set.
They weren't that high of variability, actually. Most of them were unspeakably bad.
Yeah.
Right. So they were pretty tight range. It's just that there were a few outliers that were playable. And they
$45 a pack.
But, they hadn't figured it all out yet. Something I forgot to mention earlier when you were talking about Elder Deep Fiend and how you wouldn't play Elder Deep Fiend in your red-green energy deck, even if you were splashing blue. You just want to negate them. Did you see Brad Kilburn's 21st place Teamer Energy aggro deck from Omaha? His deck was basically the same thing, the red-green energy aggro, no pump spells, instead using Whirler Virtuoso and Rogue Refiner. But instead of Elder Deep Fiend, instead of the 3 Elder Deep Fiends, he's just playing 3 negates. I was wondering if this was a little more your cup of tea as far as energy aggro decks go.
I mean,
he's even got a sideboard after your own heart.
So, I'm just navigating to his deck list.
With 4 Aetherworks Marvel, 4 Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, and 3 Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, he can just do it backwards. Like, everybody else starts with the Marvel deck and then gets out. He starts out, and then he gets in.
So, I think that's probably awesome on day 1. But then, once the table's narrow, don't people kind of know where you're coming from? Like, that's the kind of the only problem with that, right? Like, it also depends, right? Like, if you're... Zvi and I have talked on many occasions about, what if we just did this? And then he says something like, I could never do this. I being Zvi. It's just like, people would just say, "Oh, Zvi's doing this thing," and then I would never get anyone, right? Like, and I think that's part of the problem.
So
it's probably awesome on day one.
But what if? So I don't know how physically similar of a build this gentleman has with Scott Lips. So Scott Lip came in 23rd with a Teamer Energy deck with 3 negate main deck instead of 3 Elder Deep Fiends.
Yeah.
His sideboard had 0 Woodweaver's Puzzle, not Aetherworks Marvel or Ulamog. Instead, he had all sorts of Floresian things. He's got a Dragon Master Outcast, Chandra Flamecaller, 2 Tireless Trackers, 3 Ceremonious Rejections, 2 Dissenter's Deliverance, a Sky Sovereign. He's all over the place.
So here's a question I have. Right?
That's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, I'm actually. This is a thing that you see fairly often in Standard right now. So Scott's got a creature deck main deck, right? He's got 22 creatures and 3 Chandras, and it's about like playing good permanents and just beating you up with good 4 and 5 drops or whatnot. But he's got 2 copies of Tireless Tracker in his main deck and 2 copies of Tireless Tracker in his sideboard. So presumably, he wants to have a configuration where he has 4 Tireless Trackers in his deck sometimes. Talk to me about this. I actually just don't understand this. I like Tireless Tracker so much. I don't understand the decks. Like, I have friends who are like, all right, we're playing Aetherworks Marvel. We're just going to start 2 Tireless Tracker. It makes no sense to me, this sentence. Right? Like, talk to me about this. Splitting Tireless Trackers or only playing 2. Really, the splitting it I don't get because he's a creature deck.
So I don't understand. Are you suggesting 0 or 4?
I am not suggesting either 0 or 4. I'm saying
What's wrong with 2 then?
He's already playing 4. I don't understand the split. I'm saying teach me.
So you're saying why not play 4?
Teach me, Sensei. Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to understand what it is where you're coming from, like what it is you're looking at. So are you talking about why are you not just playing 4 Tireless Trackers?
Yeah, I don't get it.
Because drawing 2 is so bad early against against Mardu or zombies, or so the conventional wisdom goes.
But it's not nearly as bad as just having a Bristling Hydra in your hand in some of those matchups, especially if you don't have the just play a Hydra and it dies.
No, those matchups are where you want the Hydra.
I understand Hydra is really good sometimes. Like
those
if you already have
matchups where it's really good.
It's great against Mardu. That's where you want it. That's just
that's what I said. Mardu, zombies, and blue-red is where you want the Hydra. I think the Hydra is actually pretty good right now. It's not good against Marvel, of course.
No.
But other than that, it's pretty good. Not at all. I would play... I don't know. The Hydra seems fine to me against zombies. It's a little slow, but you want to have something. I mean, you want to play something different on turns 1, 2, and 3, but it's a fine turn 4.
How good is the Glorybringer against zombies? It seems like he'd be pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. They have Grasp of Darkness, but yeah, it's pretty good.
I mean, you get like one good shot in, though.
Although, actually, more and more people are not playing Grasp of Darkness because of its, relatively poor standing against Marvel, to say nothing of, matchups like Blue-Red or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't mind Glorybringer that much, but it's kind of a rough time. It's not at its all-time high. What do you think of main deck Confiscation Coup, though?
I mean, it's probably awesome when you land it, right? Like, I don't know. I've seen everything cooed from a Marvel. The other thing is he can fuel a Marvel, right? Like it's trivial for him to fuel a Marvel, right? I mean, I've seen Ulamog Confiscation cooed, right? So you can just it's always value, right? Like even if you just get like a small to medium guy, like you could be getting a blocker out of the way and it scales really powerfully.
So what do you think of Owen Turtenwald? Hall of Fame member Owen Turtenwald's Team or Marvel deck that he used to finish 26th. So he's playing compared to, for instance, Brad's deck, which we talked about earlier, Owen's playing 4 Censor and then just 1 Dissenter's Deliverance. And then he's got a Sweltering Sun. So he cut 2 Dissenter's Deliverances for the 4th Censor and a Sweltering Suns. And then he's got 2 Whirler Virtuosos instead of 2 Chandras. And then his sideboard has Glorybringer instead of Ulven Wild Hydra, and lots of Tireless Tracker. And then his main deck has one Shrine of the Forsaken God and no Hydras either.
So a lot of stuff going on here. So one of them is really the Whirler Virtuosos in this deck are kind of taking the place of Chandra, right? Like that's the way that I would look at it. So and then I don't know. I think that the Censor, Sweltering Sun, Dissenter's Deliverance interplay there in Owen's deck is I don't know, some combination of preference and experience. I think the Negate is pretty relevant, right? Like, I like
but a lot of
getting
people play
somebody.
Negate.
But the thing that I think that just I'm not sure how to approach this. I think that I would just say I would prefer Brad's main deck, but I love Owen's sideboard. I love the 4 trackers. I actually really like the Glorybringer. That's something that you don't see super often. So I think the Sweltering Suns in the sideboard are a little puzzling to me. What do you think about those? Like, if you're gonna pick a card to sweep with, it seems like a kind of an odd sideboard card. I think that I probably like it more as a yeah.
Which one would you use?
All right, I can get. It seems.
What do you want? Kozilek's Return?
Kozilek's Return has some value here. Because of Ulamog. I don't know. It just seems like an odd sideboard card to me.
I don't know. I sideboarded it.
Yeah, but you played a blue-red control deck. It's a completely different archetype. Like, I mean, you look just like, in my Marvel deck, I just kind of want like a medium to low-powered 3-casting.
I want it.
And it's got 2 red in the top right. Just make it a little challenging for my Lumbering Falls deck to get. I mean, not too challenging, but this Lumbering Falls, Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. Cycle. Just send it to the graveyard.
Asa Snyder's finished 28th with a list that had 2 Kozilek's Returns main deck with a 3rd in the board. The reason, of course, being that in addition to 3 Ulamogs, he's got 4 Elder Deep Fiends.
This was a strategy that was like a little popular before with using Elder Deep Fiend as a hit in Marvel. I gotta say I kind of like it. The thing that is weird to me though is I cannot wrap my head around some of these numbers. 3 Servant of the Conduit, 3 Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot.
The perfect split.
No, like Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot is literally the combo. Every time I see someone play Knot 4, I'm just like, I don't know how you do that. Like, I would have just slashed Whirler Virtuosos from my list if I was gonna. But I guess Whirler Virtuosos are synergistic with Elder Deep Fiend. I don't know. I like the concept of having another hit, especially one that's medium castable like this. Obviously, it makes Kozilek's Return so much better than Sweltering Suns to have so many expensive Eldrazi.
Yep. So, are there any other standard decks you want to talk about, or what would you think of taking a look at a little Hour of Devastation?
Oh well,
yeah.
I think that's I could get behind that. Let's switch gears. So. It's crazy that there's new cards coming already.
Yes. And 3 of the headlining, 3 of the really big cards from this set got revealed, and from the looks of it, ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
What do you think of Nico Bolas, God Pharaoh? This is that 4 blue, black, red. For a 7 loyalty planeswalker, his top ability, so he's got 4 abilities. His top ability is +2, target opponent exiles cards from the top of his or her library until he or she exiles a non-land card. Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So, like, temporal aperture milling your opponent is, like, already just, like, his +2. So then +1 is each opponent exiles 2 cards from his or her hand.
That's some kind of Karn, huh?
Oh, yeah. And then -4, Nico Bolas God Pharaoh deals 7 damage to target opponent or creature an opponent controls. And then -12, exile each non-land permanent your opponents control.
I think that this is a weird card to have rotating into standard. I think it's possible, depending on how bans go. I mean, you really want to have this and Chandra and Marvel all at the same time. You might not play any Eldrazi anymore, right? Like, isn't this a wicked top-end card that you could just easily cast for 7? And it's the +2 ability is so variable. Like, you get insanely paid off if you're in the right matchup.
Dude, isn't the -4 ability just bananas? That's the part that just seems sick to me.
I mean,
like it's confusing. Like the Super Karn and the like temporal aperture aspect, those are like powerful, but they're confusing. How confused can you be about 7 mana deal 7, but you also just have Nico Bolas in play?
But you keep forget about, wasn't there the card that like triggers off of Bolas's too that we talked about some months ago? So like that might be in your deck. Yeah, like it's just Fireball for 7, right? To the face if you want it, and you've still got 3 loyalty left. Yeah, I mean I don't know, Patrick. I don't think that the +2 or the +1 are particularly confusing. Like, Super Karn is a powerful ability to put on a 7 casting us Planeswalker that starts with 7 loyalty. Like, you just cast it and mess them up. And then the +2 is, I think it's just dangerous for the current standard.
Yeah, but man, the -4.
Yeah, all these abilities are bonkers. I mean, like, you could just... I'm not wrong here, right? You could +2 them and just Ulamog, right?
Yeah.
Like,
if their top card is Ulamog.
It doesn't have to be the top. It could be too deep. It's okay. Yeah, I think this card is... I think... I don't know. Is this card stupid if they don't ban Marvel? Is it still just stupid? You played in control deck. Like, wouldn't your blue-red deck, maybe some version of this, maybe want to inherit some black and see what it could do?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually think this card gets better if they ban Marvel, though.
Because it's the new kind of like, big man on campus.
Yeah, exactly. There's less, there's less big, there's less powerful if high end in the format to exist. But I don't know. I think this card looks sweet. It's confusing, like without having the context, because there are a lot of worlds that are too fast for this card.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of worlds that this card is too powerful for. So we really just got to see what the rest of the set brings, because this card definitely, it has a lot of power to it. I really think that the 7 damage going upstairs is a big part of the appeal.
I think I personally, in the dark, I think this card looks outstanding. Because isn't it possible that it will see play in wider formats? As I recall, didn't Ali Antrazi play the 8 casting cost Nico Bolas and extended? Right, like there's some possibility there, right? Or man, it's just crazy. It's just Modern is too compact for a card like this.
No, I don't know. No, I mean, like, Karn gets played, right?
Yeah, I think this card's very, very comparable to Karn. Obviously, Karn gets played in decks that don't tap for 3 different colors of mana that aren't green, but it's I think a comparable card in terms of its cost, and it's more powerful than Karn at some of the things at the same casting cost. Right, like even the -4 is comparable to Karn's dealing with a permanent ability, right? Not the same, but like they kind of fill similar niches in play pattern.
So, what did you think about the other ones, though, particularly Bontu? Bontu's action. What is it? Bontu's
Last Reckoning.
Yeah, exactly.
So Bontu's Last Reckoning is a really interesting card. So it's 1 BB for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures. Lands you control don't untap during your next untap step. So on first blush, it's like, wow, here's a Damnation that costs less than Damnation, right? But then you're like, is it even... I think that might be like a red herring, because how good are you wrathing for on turn 3? Like, what are you really getting rid of that you couldn't get with like a Flaying Tendrils or something, right? So it's actually, if you're going to cast it deeper in the game, it's pretty disadvantageous, right? On the other hand, what if you can cast it without using lands, right? Like, now it doesn't have a drawback anymore. So net, I think it will be heavily played, but that there's a lot of contextually driven stuff going on with this card that I can't anticipate at all yet. But it's definitely going to mess people up sometimes. It's definitely going to be an overpay sometimes, and I think like it's going to be a negligible drawback sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the more like artifact mana or creature mana, I guess not creature mana, but the more artifact mana you have, the less the drawback costs you. But some of the advantages to this are, first of all, if you Bontu's Last Reckoning, you can actually, I know this is going to sound funny, but you can Bontu's Last Reckoning with Goblin Dark Dweller.
So...
I'm not saying that that's the greatest thing in the world.
It's just a 5 casting cost Bontu's Last Reckoning.
No,
right?
but it's the option. It's an extra option. Okay, how about this? Bontu's Last Reckoning, and you just have some mana open.
Yeah, I think that the card is like interestingly costed. You know, when you consider both the mana cost and the.
Would you play this in Legacy?
I think this card. I think I would certainly play this in Legacy. Yeah.
Wow, I don't know that I would.
I mean, it's how you look like. What do you call it? Supreme Verdict gets played in Legacy. Right, like there's actually dangerous creatures that are like pretty big and could be hard to kill that you might have to deal with on turn 3. And I think that you could play this in a context where you're like, all right, I'm going to tap out for this, kill your Tarmogoyf and Nimble Mongoose or something, something like that. And then they go to make their next play. Even if you can't untap, you could still get them with a Daze, or get them with a Force of Will, so that the fact that you can't untap becomes less of a factor because you were going to play all these free spells anyway, right? Even if somebody's like Delver of Secrets, Flip Insectile Aberration, Tarmogoyf, you certainly would consider playing a 3 casting cost Wrath, right? There's no like. I mean, Damnation is... It's hard to say what's too slow, but like you're gonna end up taking like 14 damage or something before you can get that off. I think the front end speed is potentially rewarding. I think you certainly play this card in Modern too. You just have to find a home. It's not good against combo decks. It's not particularly good against burn decks, but those are not the ones you decided in against. Like you could easily side this in against like a mid-range Abzan deck that has a Tarmogoyf, a Grimflayer, and a Siege Rhino in play, and be overjoyed to not be able to untap the next turn, right? Like, oh wow, what's an Abzan deck gonna do to you that like not being able to untap is really so terminal versus having like 3 of the best creatures in the format in play, right? I think that's a trade-off that people will make, and it's a pretty repeatable, gameplay situation.
Yep. It also just, I think, is tactically relevant how cheap it is in terms of big turns. The specific turns, sometimes you end up having to fight a couple battles. It a little bit reminds me of Pact of Negation in a weird way, where you're saving a little bit of mana now, but then you're going to be like drained later.
Yeah, I mean, there is also some implication because of expertises, right? Like having
that's cool.
Like just being able to sneak it out there might be. I'm not sure which which ones you want to be best buddies with, but it's there. As far as I know, the third one that's been revealed from Hour of Devastation is Samut, the Tested, which is a planeswalker version of Samut.
Yep.
So we've previously seen Samut as a creature, right?
Right. Just in the last set, actually.
Yep. So now there's a planeswalker version. So Samut is a 2 red-green for a 4 loyalty planeswalker with 3 abilities. +1 ability. Up to 1 target creature gains double strike until end of turn. -2 ability. Samut the Tested deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 target creatures and or players. -7. Search your library for up to 2 creature and or planeswalker cards. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. I think this card could be really good, right? Like, the +1 ability is dangerous. Like, don't you think? Like, just double strike is... Like, I could use third or fourth turn Samut followed by, I don't know, I'm just going to say a Glory Bringer, right? You just get in for a ton of damage there. And then if you're playing Samut in the same deck as large haste creatures, it's a good payoff on the -7.
I don't know. This one looks okay, but it kind of reminds me of Arlen Cord a little bit.
Yeah.
And not just, I mean, obviously the cost and all that,
it's
too.
It's the same cast of cost.
Like, it's...
Arlen Cord's seen some play.
Yeah, it's fine. I think Samut's fine. It's just... I'm a little, maybe, what is the word? Jaded. The amount of busted Planeswalker, like, so many Gideons and Chandras and so on have really set my sights into weird places. The Samut looks decent, though. That Planeswalker's that ultimate's definitely not nothing.
I think it's pretty powerful. Like, I don't know, you can get, like, Kozilek and Ulamog.
Dude, if you just have doubling season, you can just drop Samut. Samut has 8 loyalty. Then you -7. Search your deck for 2 planeswalkers, and you can just go get another Samut, and then whatever one you want, like Nico Bolas or whatever, and then you just go get like another Samut and like another one of whatever you want, like a Karn, whatever you want. You can just go nuts.
So in your universe, you've had a Nico Bolas around for like 9 turns, and you're still searching with Samut?
No, why?
Like, I don't know. Like,
no, doubling season.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think I would want to play. I don't think I would want to play all those cards at the same time. It's just me.
Yeah.
So,
no.
You're pretty hot on Bontu, pretty hot on Nico Bolas, and then not particularly hot on Samut. Is that?
No, I don't know. I don't know how hot I am on Nico Bolas either. I think Nico Bolas, it's really going to end up coming down to just the context. How fast is the format? And I think that the Bontu one is solid. It's just, I think these are all really confusing. It's weird that they would make the card that good, because it's like, it's a departure. Black hasn't had sweepers like that recently, but it's exciting. It'll change the dynamic a little bit. It's really good with vehicles is the big thing.
Oh, it's great with vehicles.
Right, that's the big thing. That's the big thing.
We had, what was that, -4/-4 for 4?
Languish. And Languish was great.
That was just a year and a half ago. It wasn't that long
right,
ago.
but Kill is so different than Languish. Additionally, the drawback of not being able to untap, it matters a lot less when you've got planeswalkers in play, and that's part of what I think is the appeal of Bontu's Last Reckoning, is that if you're playing with a bunch of planeswalkers, then you can actually be getting a lot of value out of your turn, even if you didn't get to untap your land. And that's not even counting if you get to do some fancy stuff like Corrupted Graftstone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that these revealed cards I think they're all going to see play. I think that Nicol Bolas's low end is like sideboard all-star. Like we were talking just even earlier in this podcast about everybody playing kind of these go long. I start off as an aggro deck. I start off as a combo deck, and here are all my Sorens. After sideboarding, this card's one mana more than Soren on casting cost, and he's got a banana set of abilities. So even if the format is fast, we have precedent to people want to sideboard to slow it down.
Oh man, particularly if they have a Soren in play and they do the old Soren plus, and you go Nico Bolas minus.
Still got a Nico Bolas.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So we've seen a little bit of difference in messing around. If you were going to play a standard deck this week, just to close it out, would you blue red it, try one of these new strategies? Just throw in with Brad Nelson and his version of Team Aetherworks. Where's your head for that deck decision right now, Pat?
Well, it depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. I think that the best choice overall is Marvel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably not do that, though. It depends on how high the stakes are. If I'm just playing for the love of the game, then I think I might play blue red. But if I'm talking about recommendations, I think that if we're do as I say, not as I do, then I think I would, the math says Marvel.
I think Brad's version of Marvel is inspired. I love those Hydras. I love the Hydra land combo. But I think that whatever deck I played, I would want to have 4 copies of Tireless Tracker, not a less than 4. Somewhere in my 75. I think that card is just it's one of the most kind of opponent testing, monolithic sort of change the course of the game for a relatively small amount of mana cards we've seen in a while. I think it's real special, and it gets played in so many different kinds of decks as a testament to that.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff, man. I think we're going to see a lot more Tireless Tracker in the time to come.
I agree. So, I'm Michael J. Flores.
And I'm Patrick Chapin, and thank you guys all for joining us every week, sharing us on social media. All the places, Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, Instagram, Flores' secret MySpace account. I don't know, wherever,
It's not a secret MySpace account. So in the words of our one-time guest, Patrick Sullivan, yeah, Mike, you're totally the kind of person to have a black and white MySpace photo. Which I did.
Oh, yeah, of course. I actually just saw it recently.
Yeah, but that's how I roll, man. I'm very artisanal, like the bread.
Sure.
So speaking of Patreon, just want to shout out our thanks to Kobe Keller. Thanks,
Kobe,
for supporting us, Kobe. That was a great set of difference this week for Standard. Go out there and game on and brew it up.
Yeah, I know you might be thinking, oh, Aetherworks Marvel, because Amonkhet, now in the new Standard and the bans and everything, there's just no power that can possibly stand up to Aetherworks Marvel. But I got news for you. There is always a greater power.